So, hello and welcome today to our roundtable on the role of hydrogen in the future energy mix, brought to you as part of the Installer magazine Net Zero Festival and sponsored by Baxi. My name is Jim McClelland. I'm founder and editor of SustMeme, home to both the magazine and the top 500 rankings. I'm joined today by Steve Sutton, technical manager at the HHIC, Heating and Hot Water Industry Council, Tommy Isaac, principal engineer at Progressive Energy, Heidi Genoni, Program Project Manager at Arup, and Jeff House, Head of External Affairs at Baxi, will be kicking off the session for us in just a moment. So, the role of hydrogen in the future energy mix. Well, we journalists, we've been writing about hydrogen as the next big thing for quite some time now, to be honest. It's not a news story, but it is perhaps time for a new chapter. Typically, fuel cells for transport attract most of the media buzz, from cars and buses to trains and now even planes. But what about wider applications for industry and heating? Well, the markets, they're getting excited about the prospects. The latest hydrogen economy outlook, Bloomberg NEF, suggests that cleaner green hydrogen, cost competitive with natural gas and better than coal, could help tackle the toughest third of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, cutting up to 34% from fossil fuels and industry. Interest in the UK is particularly strong. For context, the latest report, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Hydrogen, cites numerous case studies, particular focus on the pioneering work of Baxi, as well as trial projects like HHIC and High Deploy, the UK's first operational pilot to inject zero carbon hydrogen for gas network, which went live on the Keele University campus at the start of this year. So the UK sees itself as having both a valuable history and an exciting future in hydrogen, vital to the energy mix here. Finally, the Committee on Climate Change has openly said the UK will not meet its net zero targets without significant investment in the hydrogen economy. The Energy Networks Association agrees there's no realistic scenario whereby the UK can achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 without blue and green hydrogen playing a key role in the decarbonisation of large emitting sectors such as industry, transport, power and heat. So, Hydrogen Predictor, one of the key low carbon technologies driving the UK forward on its journey to net zero. What are the implications and expectations for the heating and hot water sector? From heat networks to blue and green boilers, especially for engineers and installers. Here to paint a picture of where the hydrogen economy is really going, I'll hand you over to Jeff House, Head of External Affairs at Baxi, our roundtable sponsors. So Jeff, talk us through what it really means for the UK.
Lovely, thank you, Jim. Well, you've covered a lot of the key points already, to be fair, in terms of where the debate and the level of interest is around hydrogen. So hydrogen is effectively an energy carrier, so you create hydrogen, as you know, from a number of different sources. Importantly, when you bring it to an end use, it's zero carbon at point of use. So the thing which we need to get across is the way in which we heat our homes and businesses has to change significantly between now and 2050. So we're traditionally a very gas-centric nation. 85% of our homes are connected to the gas grid and rely upon natural gas today for heat and hot water. So that's about 23 million meter points. And we're the largest European market currently for gas-fired central heating boilers. So that in itself has to change fundamentally between now and 2050 to get to net zero. So that in itself brings a number of challenges. We've got a fairly poor quality housing stock out there, so energy efficiency, insulation, leakiness isn't particularly great. We're sort of known as the cold man of Europe in some circles, which is a moniker that sort of sticks. And we've also got a really, really well developed and ingrained gas industry. So there's 130,000 gas safe engineers fitting around about 1.6, 1.7 million gas boilers per year, servicing a park of 23 million products out there. So there's a number of different options on the table on how to get to net zero. There's a number of different ways of heating buildings that could contribute to that aim. By looking at hydrogen, we're effectively exploring a relatively low impact from a consumer point of view method of doing it. So the idea is that we've developed a boiler and other manufacturers developing appliances that are in terms of size and performance, very, very similar to what people currently have today, but will operate on hydrogen. So you get all of the heat, the hot water, all the benefit that people are used to in a very, very small form, compact case size, with zero carbon emissions. So effectively it cracks that issue without having to go to great lengths of effectively sort of ripping houses apart to do potential alternatives. Another potential constraint that this helps with as well is most boilers sold today onto the market are what's called combination boilers, so heat and hot water from one box. Most other alternatives out there will require the installation of a hot water cylinder in order to provide hot water, and again, have you got room for it? So there's a number of different levels of debate, if you like. So there's the energy systems level, where hydrogen as a vector can play a great part in terms of balancing and interseasonal storage. There's the distribution part of it, whereby we've got several £billion worth of gas network assets, which potentially could be at risk, but could be reused and repurposed to transport hydrogen, which makes great sense in that regard. And then there's the householder consumer bit, which in our view is really the most important part of how do we go about firstly getting access into people's homes to create some kind of change or do some kind of intervention, and secondly, how can that be done in the least impactful way possible? And this is certainly showing great potential there. So that's really our key thing. Is firstly, we believe that hydrogen appliances that burn 100% hydrogen will be a strong part of the future solution. We also have the potential for what's known as a hydrogen-ready boiler. So this, when we come on to government asks later, this is one of the key ones. So the idea with hydrogen-ready, it's a boiler that works on natural gas out of the box today. Some of the internal components are upgraded, ready to work on hydrogen in the future. Then at the point of a given network conversion, so a given postcode is converted, for example, an engineer comes out with a bag of 2 or 3 components. It makes a fairly simple intervention and switches the appliance over. So the idea is that you could pre-populate a great proportion of the UK by a certain date if we had a requirement for hydrogen-ready boilers on the market. So that's where we are really. So we're busy working on our equipment, which is predominantly boilers on the hydrogen side. We've got an interest in fuel cells. We also manufacture and sell alternative products, so heat pumps, heat networks, all that good stuff. But we're very, very keen on hydrogen at the minute. It's one of our sort of central strategies. And there are a number of projects which will effectively bear fruit in the next year or two and start to build into that narrative of the safety case, of the viability, and actually do some live demonstration work, which is why we've got a great selection of people here today from a variety of industry projects to start talking about it.
Excellent, thanks. So covered a lot of the practicalities and key points, a number of issues in play, and we're very much hearing it's a transition scenario. So opening it up to the round table, first, if perhaps we look at the kind of 20% hydrogen blend, as in Kiel HHIC. So Tommy Isaac, if I could come to you, please. Kiel HHIC looks set to deliver some interesting outcomes. Please explain your involvement there and help us understand what to expect as next steps, please.
Hi Jim, good to be with you today. I'm part of the overall project management team. So my company, Progressive Energy, we are the overall project managers of the High Deploy and High Deploy 2 programs. So we've been working on this for best part of about 4 years now. The program will run until March 2023, so about 2.5 years left or so. So where we have started blending at Kiel University, which we started on the 30th of October of last year. So this was the first ever UK trial of hydrogen, where we secured the first ever approval from the HHIC to inject hydrogen above the regulatory limit at the moment of 0.1%, and that was achieved in November of 2018. So we've been safely blending hydrogen since October of last year. We had a slight hiatus due to COVID, but are now back up and running. and the trial is due to extend out until March of next year to capture the following winter season. So results to date are overwhelmingly successful. So all of the appliances, all of the network, all of the kind of customer interface, if you like, have really made, or there have been no perception of change, if you like. So the only reason why people know that we're blending hydrogen is because we're telling them that they're burning hydrogen. Other than that, all of the consumers are seeing absolutely no difference in the way that they use gas today, which is exactly the intended outcome.
Excellent. So no news is good news.
Exactly, and yeah, it's a very interesting project because we spent a lot of time and money and effort trying to get the result that no one knew that we were here. The next big step, if you like, is the first public trial. So we have just submitted the evidence base to the HHIC, which is now under review, to try and grant the first approval for a public trial. So this would be due to take place at the end of the year in Northern Gas Networks gas network in the Gateshead area, and would be supplying a blend of hydrogen to 670 homes. So this would be the first kind of large scale kind of ramp up of blending deployment, and we will be working with the HHIC over the next 3 to 4 months to review the evidence and hopefully have the approval granted in about 3 months.
Excellent, exciting stuff. And if I could bring Steve Sutton in here too, what are the key points that installers need to know about the potential adoption of 20% hydrogen blends into UK network? I wonder if you could catch us up on the work of the HHIC on hydrogen and give us your thoughts, please, Steve.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for that. Yes, as you say, I'm Steve Sutton from HHIC. We represent a lot of manufacturers in the heating and hot water sector, and we have been doing quite a lot of work with the high deploy team. We started back some time ago working with HSE, linking our manufacturers up with HSE and the scientists who were reviewing the safety case for the project at Kiel. So we had quite a few meetings at their site in Buxton to go through all the issues that we may have with appliances that would be burning a gas with a hydrogen blend of up to 20%. And we have to remember that technically we already test appliances with hydrogen blend. So within the standards, we have to, as part of the tests, run the appliances in the laboratory tests with a hydrogen blend in there, and that's to test for fault conditions. And it means that every appliance that is out there on the marketplace has had some test work carried out on it with a hydrogen blend already. So it was a very positive result from the manufacturers when we went through the case with HSE. So we've then taken quite a lot of time working with Tommy to decide how we could test appliances on site. You can imagine that there's already appliances at the Kiel University site, and then we have had 8 boilers installed within the plant room there, which gives Tommy and his team the opportunity to do some specific testing work on products. And so one of the key things that Tommy and his team have done is to test flue gas, which is one of the key checks for installers. And as a result of that, we believe that there won't be anything that the installers will be measuring the flue gas which would cause us any concerns to current working practices. So all in all, we think it's very, very positive so far. And as Tommy says, we're looking forward to the extension of the trials so that we can get more products out there, really. Great,
thank you, Steve. Lots of positives to draw from that. And perhaps if we expand then to look at 100% hydrogen prospects in the future, Heidi Genoni, if I could ask you, through the HHIC programme, other routes, there are pure hydrogen appliances in development. How far away from market are they? What projects and programs are Arup involved in of note, please?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks very much for the invitation today. I'm delighted to share some of our thinking, the work that we've been undertaking at Arup. Just by way of brief introduction, I work within the Arup Energy Advisory section. I am a program and project manager by background and a chartered civil engineer. The work that we've been undertaking at Arup, we've been involved with a number of different hydrogen projects, and really from our perspective, we see hydrogen has we believe there's a really important role for hydrogen to play moving forwards in terms of decarbonisation and energy transition. We won't be able to get to net zero without the support of hydrogen, amongst other things, and it's particularly going to be important on those hard to decarbonised areas, particularly heating homes and our buildings and all those sorts of things. We are involved with a number of different projects. There's Project Cavendish we're involved with, which is looking at how we might possibly be able to provide hydrogen from the Isle of Grain to support London. Some of my colleagues are also involved with work with Scotland, looking at hydrogen strategy there, also other colleagues in New Zealand. And then the role that I'm particularly involved with is the HHIC programme. HHIC programme is a fantastic programme. It's funded by the government Department of Bays, and it's looking at the feasibility of developing the technologies and the safety to enable 100% hydrogen use within the home. So HHIC is covered in a few broad areas. The main areas it's looking at is its safety and standards developments, and also the development of the technologies. So innovations in terms of development of things like boilers, cookers, gas fires, and a couple of other innovative technologies that we've got developing underway. And the programme is really looking at how we can innovate those products to a point that effectively they can be commercialised. And Jeff Baxi have been developing one of the hydrogen boilers, which Jeff, I'm sure, will be telling you a bit more about in a moment. But through the work so the HHIC programme started at the back end of 2017, and we're due to come to our end of our conclusions in springtime in March 21. And it's all about gathering the evidence base to support the case for moving forwards with hydrogen, particularly for heating homes and our domestic properties. So really, the really interesting thing that we've seen from the HHIC programme at the start of the programme, it was considered that it's going to be impossible and really difficult to develop hydrogen boilers, cookers and gas fires within a short space of time, but with a fantastic response from industry and collaboration, that actually we're getting really positive results at the moment. Baxi have developed the first prototype, which Jeff I'm sure we'll tell you about a bit more in a moment, but then also important contributions for organisations like the HHIC and BSI that have developed guidance and standards around something called PAS 4444, which is really helpful in the development of those boilers and all the appliances we use in the home. One of the important philosophies from the HHIC programme has been about following this concept of like for like. So actually the appliances that we're going to be using for hydrogen should be very similar to the existing appliances we have currently, just because that will make it much easier from a consumer perspective, both to install them in the homes and also operate and run them. So whilst our HHIC programme isn't quite at the end yet, it's making fantastic progress with all the contributors to the programme, and it's looking very positive at the moment.
Right, it's a refreshing change to hear that it's more doable and less difficult than perhaps you first anticipated, because that's not always the way with these kinds of programs. And you've nicely anticipated really the question I was going to ask Jeff next, which is, when it comes to boilers, in simple terms, hydrogen is different to natural gas. So how does a pure hydrogen boiler differ to cater for this? What is the difference? Please.
Sure. So it's important to differentiate on the 20% part as well. So the work that Tommy and team are doing at Kiel is effectively looking at existing technologies, so today's boilers, and there's a degree of tolerance, if you like, or a degree of latitude within the current technology that can accommodate a percentage hydrogen up to a certain amount. When we start to go to 100% hydrogen, which is what effectively HHIC and other projects leading on from that we'll be looking at, it's effectively a combustible gas that you burn inside an appliance to produce heat. So that in itself is similar. There are some technical challenges around the differences in that combustion process. So it's a faster flame speed, it's a hotter flame, and importantly, because there's no carbon coming in, flame control is really where a lot of work on development and effectively sort of some breakthroughs there. So what we'd usually do with a natural gas flame is have what's called an ionisation current, where you pass an electric current between 2 points to actually determine the presence of the flame. Because there's no carbon to effectively do that, to react, so we've had to look at different flame detection and flame control methodologies. So inside the product, some fairly cutting edge stuff going on in terms of control and the way in which you go about sort of deploying that flame. Outside, it looks exactly the same as one of our standard natural gas boilers that we sell today. So it's dreadfully boring from the outside, and it's all very interesting if you're into the geek aspect of it internally. From an installer's point of view, I mean, this is something that was touched upon earlier. The installation process will be very, very similar to a gas boiler. It's the same sort of connections, the same wall mounting jig, for example. The flue's similar. Where there will be some differences, in which is where there's some work needed, which is ongoing at the moment, will be how do we go around things like flue gas analysis and combustion analysis, because that will be different. And some of the safety aspects around the installation and commissioning will be slightly different as well. So the anticipation is that we might have, for example, a slightly different variation of the gas safe framework. There might be a new module, something like that, for example, might be in the offing, but it's work that's yet to be done before we get to the point of mass installation. So our particular products group at the moment, so we've effectively produced some prototype appliances for HHIC. So we've got a 28 kilowatt combination boiler. So this is the lead runner, if you like. So it's heat and hot water from one box, sits on the kitchen wall or in a cupboard somewhere quite happily, does the job. And that's by far and away the bulk of the market today. So we've cracked that. That effectively then gives us, a nice bit of warm feeling, effectively sort of move forward. The other one we have is a system boiler, similar output, but that would drive a hot water cylinder in houses where you've got a separate cylinder. So effectively gives us a retrofit portfolio that will fit pretty much any need out there. So whatever the existing house is, appliance out, new appliance in, and away we go. From that point onwards, really, it's just a case now of putting initial prototypes and then the sort of the beta or the second iteration of that into live trial over the next year or two, which we'll be working quite hard to do. That then helps to build a number of things around the not only the safety case, but also the viability of the whole thing to a number of industry stakeholders. So we've been asked questions all the time, can we do it? When can we do it? How viable is it to get this moving at pace? And we'll be feeding into the sort of the wider body of information that will help to inform that in the next year or so. So we can start to see some really big strides coming up.
Great, thanks. And Steve, in terms of sort of perhaps accelerating towards critical mass take-up, looking at heating and hot water sector, there are a number of bodies promoting the prospect of hydrogen-ready boilers as a possible mandate in 2025 to force the issue forward, if you like. Why and what's the council's view on this?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think that we're in the very early stages of development of products at the moment. We do have the prototypes available, and we know that they can work on natural gas and can be converted to hydrogen. So we don't have any issues with the products, but we do think that we need some more live trials. So following the end of the HHIC project, the next stage to do the live trials, the same as Tom is doing in the High Deploy project, is very key to the future of how we develop hydrogen in the future. It's very important to understand how we use hydrogen in the home and that it's safe. And so before we start mandating, we need to make sure we've got a very good safety case from some live trials. And in addition to that, then there is the commercial sector, HHIC includes commercial products. We're at the early stages of developing commercial products. So it's important that we know that we can produce a full range of products that covers, you know, every sector. So I think then as we move forward, there's the process plants as well. So we're sort of, you know, at the along the timeline, we're probably at the early stages of saying, yes, we've got products, but we need to do quite a lot more work before we can start mandating for hydrogen-ready products. Having said that, it doesn't stop any manufacturer from launching a hydrogen-ready product, because you'll be putting it on the marketplace today as a natural gas product. So there's no reason why that couldn't take place.
And the market might help drive things. So Tommy, how important are demonstration pilot projects, live trials at scale, I might add, to building that kind of market confidence and viability of hydrogen and helping accelerate this rollout program?
So the live demonstrations are absolutely necessary. So until you have a kind of a central demonstration that you're working around, everything is quite abstract in that everything's contained within reports and it's all done by disparate bodies. But until you have a live demonstration that all organisations are working towards, it doesn't really become real until that point. And certainly in trying to provide the confidence needed to consumers, to the government, to industry, live trials are what is needed at this point. We know how to operate appliances and to supply them with hydrogen in a safe manner. So it's now the time where we need to transition from reports into live deployment.
Excellent. And Heidi, could I ask you please for a last word on risk, really, not just about the technicalities, but also the perceptions maybe amongst consumers and installers. What proof do we have already that hydrogen is safe?
Well, safety is absolutely critical, and it's one of the main focus areas of HHIC, and we absolutely need to gather all the evidence from a technical basis in order to support the position that it is safe to use hydrogen in our homes as natural gas. But just thinking about a couple of things before we move on to perceptions of risk, that I think it's important for us all to note and recognise that context of the gas industry as a whole is actually very safe, and using natural gas can be unsafe without the right risk reduction measures put in place. And we're anticipating that hydrogen will be similar to this, but of course we've got to gather the evidence, and that's what the HHIC programme is in the midst of at the moment. And we've undertaken a number of different experimental testings in order to support that. Now, we won't get to that result until the end of the programme, but there doesn't appear to be any showstoppers at the moment. And of course, because hydrogen is a different type of gas to natural gas, then obviously developing all the appliances as well is an important part of demonstrating and providing that safety evidence. And we touched on a little bit earlier as well, in terms of from an installation perspective as well, having that appropriate training to know how to deal with the different type of gases is going to be really important. And as part of the HHIC programme, EUS, Energy Utility Skills, have been appointed to develop a competency framework, and that work has just started. So the evidence is being gathered for 100% hydrogen, but when it comes to perceptions of hydrogen, I think the HydDeploy project is a really good example. Whilst I know that's only 20% hydrogen, that is a useful introduction for people to getting comfortable with the concept of hydrogen as part of their gas network. But I also think we can look to some other sectors as well. So for example, transport. I mean, we have hydrogen vehicles on our roads at the moment, and in many respects, it's a gas that's being used at a high pressure, so it's got different issues, safety issues, but hydrogen's being used already. So I think from gaining industry-wide perception and public perception of hydrogen needs to improve and grow, and that will come about by demonstration projects, but it's already being used.
Excellent. Well, that's very good points about the context we're operating in. There are parallels, there are precedents. This isn't happening in isolation. Good point to make. We've got the
Sorry,
last...
Jim, could I just make a comment as well on this? Hydrogen is not new for gas. I mean, we put 50% of hydrogen into Towns gas years and years ago. So we're going back in time here to introduce a gas that we've used before, really. So it's nothing new, and it used to be piped into people's homes every day. So
right, back to the future. I'm looking now to gather some of the key takeaways, really, and in terms of changes on the ground day to day, we're talking about practicalities. How will training and installation practices differ? What do installers need to know about what's going to happen?
So in terms of a 20% blend, which clearly is what I'll be able to speak about, I'm sure Heidi will be able to illuminate at higher levels, as well as Jeff. We have undertaken a full review of all of the underlying standards that underpin the competencies of installers, and what we've found is that there shouldn't need to be any change to the current standards and current competencies to enable an installer to work on a 20% blend boiler, i.e. if there was a 20% blend coming down the line supplying a boiler or any appliance that you were doing work on, there shouldn't need to be any change in the way that you carry out that work to accommodate that change in the gas. Now that is under review by the relevant standard organisations, so it isn't formal precedent, or it isn't formal precedent yet. However, we are hoping that we'll be able to agree that position shortly. So hopefully there should be no change.
Great, that's very reassuring news. On the other question, if I give you the politics questionnaire, if you just want to give a B to pause before you answer, and then perhaps it can be stitched in with the others later, if that's all right, please, Tommy. So lastly then, hypothetically, if I could grant you one realistic, real-world wish, policy wish from government, what would you ask for at this point in time? What's top of your wish list from the government?
So underpinning any level of hydrogen deployment is the production. So my one policy ask would be that we have a net zero compliant heat policy that allows business models to be generated to incentivize production and distribution of hydrogen, because without that, none of the appliances will be receiving any hydrogen.
Excellent, thank you, Tommy. Looking to bring together some key takeaways for the audience and things to remember from today's session. In terms of changes on the ground day to day, how will training and installation practices actually differ? What do installers need to know? So Steve, I'll come to you first about any pointers for installers looking ahead.
Yeah, from the outset, the project of Heidi Deploy has been to have no change for the consumer. So the consumer products that are out there in the field, we want them to operate as they do now with a 20% blend. So what the outline of the project was to keep the WOBI limits that we have now, and which means that you have to inject hydrogen when you've got higher WOBI gas coming down the gas main, which means that we then don't go outside the lower WOBI band. So that's quite a technical answer, but that's really what we've had to do to ensure that we don't make any differences to the appliances that are already in the field. So from a point of view of an installer, from the tests that have been carried out, we don't think they will actually find any difference with the measurements and the work that they carry out currently. So practices should remain the same. And as Tommy has advised, we've looked at they've looked at the standards that we already have in place, and there is a raft of those, as you can imagine, across the industry, because they've been written and developed over the years. And at the moment, we don't see that there will be any changes to those.
Great, and thanks for explaining the technical backdrop to that. Heidi, key takeaways, especially for installers and those at the sharp end, please.
Yeah, so HHIC's not at the end of its work yet. but principally we have tried to follow the approach that everything will be similar to the existing network and system downstream of the emergency control valve, but obviously using 100% hydrogen or 98 or full hydrogen. There will be a need to have a new gas meter, there will be a need for the new hydrogen appliances, but everything in terms of installed in the system will be similar to as it is now. But obviously the competent person who will be installing it will need to be appropriately trained to know how to install the work and system appropriately. That will be looked at in the fullness of time once we've gathered all the evidence we need to support the safety case, and that will inform that future training.
Great, and good flag for the value of training. And obviously with Baxi in the vanguard of product development, Jeff, if you could give us a few takeaways from installers, what they can expect kit-wise.
Sure, so when we're talking the 100% hydrogen stuff, which is where it will be different, the intent is first to come to market with hydrogen ready. So that will be installed under the same framework and competencies that we have today, so there's no difference. When we start to look at then converting those to pure hydrogen or installing a pure hydrogen boiler at the point of conversion, that's where differences come in. But we're not going to be in a situation where a general mainstream installer will see that for a number of years yet. So we're looking at, probably 5-6 years worth of trial work still to go on with controlled trial sites, where you're going to have specific training for the trial members there. So Heidi mentioned already that there's work to be done yet in terms of developing the competence framework for 100% hydrogen. Our learnings and our experience to date says that it's largely similar to working on a gas appliance, with some very key differences that will need to be covered by a specific training element. And we're very big advocates of training. We train several thousand engineers a year through our own training centres. So as part of the awareness and the general sort of uptake part of the programme, which is still to be developed and determined, we do our absolute utmost to do as much training as we can ourselves, as well as obviously the accredited part and the official part of it through the usual commercial outlets.
Excellent. And then a final question. So obviously the policy context for all of this is critical. It's not happening in a vacuum. So hypothetically, if I could grant you each one realistic, so a real world policy wish from government at this point in time, what would you ask for? So Steve, I'll come to you first. If you had one wish that could be granted from the government, what would you be asking for?
I think we need a clear direction from government and BEIS on the future for heating and hot water, so manufacturers can invest accordingly. It's very difficult to do that when we don't have clear policies.
Heidi, what would you be asking for?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if I've got one thing I'll ask, so I'll just put up a few key ones. But I think it would be fantastic to see a UK hydrogen strategy. That would probably be my number one thing. I think also then moving to community trials is really, really important, and the sooner we can move to those, then the better it will be. I also think it's really important that the government continues to provide the innovation funding, and I think HHIC is a fantastic example of how collaboration of industry with that initial seed funding from government has been really fantastic in terms of bringing the innovation and creative minds of the whole industry forward and coming up and finding solutions.
Great. And so Jeff, if I have my magic wand at the ready, what is it you're asking for?
Similar to Heidi, there's a whole basket of things that I'd be asking for, and we are asking for in our contact with various people. A joined up central government hydrogen strategy is one, so you've got a number of different departments that will have a part to play. So it's not just the appliances, which is our specific thing around some kind of mandate for hydrogen ready boilers. You need the supply, which has been touched on before. You need the distribution, and you need that business case for people to actually invest in generation of clean hydrogen at scale. So it really is hydrogen strategy, number one. Enable the market frameworks to effectively leverage private funding into the distribution and generation, and then carry on working with us as industry to develop the skills and competence framework and the market readiness aspects of it, so we can make a success of it.
Great. And first, could I ask, do you feel the lines of communication are open? Do you feel that there is that dialogue for you to ask for things? Have you got a listening ear in government in terms of hydrogen?
There's certainly a lot of interest. So it's been mentioned earlier on that the Committee on Climate Change have now started to say, look, you know, hydrogen is imperative in order to meet, or developing hydrogen is imperative in order to meet net zero. And that's starting to actually to open a few doors and get people interested now. So the fact that we've got something tangible to show, you know, we've the difficult technical aspects of some of the stuff that needs to be concerned. People need to be concerned with that. That element of it's almost there. That's really helpful. And again, this is general realisation that we've got less than 30 years now to the net zero target, so we need to get our skates on and start doing things. The timing of the conversation is nice. We're starting to get a lot of interest at the moment.
Excellent. Positive notes to end on. So in closing then, thank you very much. Big thank you to all the panellists, Tommy, Steve, Heidi and Jeff, plus of course our sponsors Baxi. There's lots more to see, hear and participate in during Net Zero Festival this week. Go to installeronline.co.uk, full diary of events, click on the festival page to find out more. So thank you very much. I've been Jim McClelland, editor at SustMeme. Thanks for watching.